Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrie and today we're going to be talking about some underrated books. Alright guys, so today, as you can tell by the name and title of this video, I wanted to talk to you guys about some underrated books. Some books that I do not hear talked about enough or hardly at all, and that I just love and I want to share. Some of these are like top favorite books, some are not, I will clarify, but yeah, I just wanted to share some with y'all so that you guys can hopefully get some new recommendations that you haven't heard before. Right, so I'm gonna start out with classics. I have two classics on this list that I don't hear talked about very much at all. The first one that I'm going to be talking about is Heidi. I know my cover's all whatever, I need a new one of this, but this is Heidi. This is by Joanna Spyri. Heidi is a little girl who becomes orphaned and she goes to live with her grandfather in the Swiss Alps. The setting of this is beautiful. The story is beautiful. It's a nice short little classic read, very easy to read. I read this when I was 9 and I loved it and I still love it to this day. But it's a classic that I do not hear talked about very much at all. Even booktubers that I see talking about classic books and reading classic books a lot, this is not one that really comes up very much at all. And I feel like more people need to read it and more people need to be talking about it because this is such a sweet and good read. So this is my first recommendation for a classic. My second recommendation for classics, I do own this one too, but it has no dust cover anymore. I also need a new edition of this. So that is The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I know this one is popular. This one is well known, widely known, but I don't really hear people talk about it and I'm finding more and more people that I talk to haven't actually read it yet either. So I feel like it's one that does need to be talked about. This is an amazing classic, amazing book. This is a nonfiction because it is her actual diary of a Jewish girl. And during World War II, when the Nazis were sending the Jews to the camps, and so there is a lot of stuff that's so raw and so good in this, and it's a great book. It's a wonderful book, and I definitely recommend it to anyone and everyone. You might know Anne Frank, you might know of Anne Frank, but if you haven't read the book, please do read the book. All right, and now I'm gonna move over to fantasy recommendations for this. I believe I have 3 fantasy recommendations. I'm gonna start out with my favorite one, and that is The Seer and the Sword. This is by Victoria Hanley. Guys, I am not a fantasy fan, not a big fantasy buff at all, but I love this book. It is the only fantasy I think that's on my favorite books shelf, so this is a good one. This is also a really easy one. I want to say it might be YA. I read this when I was pretty young. This has no sexual content or anything like that, nothing crazy in it. Yeah, nothing crazy in it. Really great storyline, really quick and easy read. The world, is pretty easily set up. It does have some cool magical elements, and a really cute, little romance spread throughout it, trickled underneath the whole storyline. It's really sweet. It's really great. 5-star. I made my best friend read it and she loved it. I made my husband read it and he loved it. I have yet to recommend this to somebody and for them to come back and say, that was not a good fantasy. So, just saying, if you haven't read this and you do love fantasy, I do suggest picking this up. Now, this is a interconnected standalone series, I guess. I didn't find that out until many years later. I did check out the second one. Does not hold up nearly as good as this one. It was a solid 3, maybe 3.5 stars, and this is a 5-star, so just beware if you did want to continue. It's interconnected, so it's the same world, but these characters are only briefly mentioned, in a sense of oh yeah, they're so-and-so and they're here. So it's a whole new storyline for that, but this first one is thebomb.com. So if you haven't read it, you guys need to go check this one out because it's seriously underhyped in this entire book community world. And then the second fantasy recommendation I have is actually, I read this one the most recently, and that was last year, and that is Roaring by Lindsay Duga. This is a fantasy / historical fantasy. It's set in the 1920s. It's basically a combination of that mobster scene and monsters in our world. So it's set in our world, but has monsters. I think that's a low low grade fantasy or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not very into fantasy, but I was like really surprised with how much I got invested and liked this one. Not amazing by any means, but this was definitely a 4 or 4.25 for me. It also, I would probably call this a romantasy, I guess, because there was a romance, and it's very much like, it's not just like a subtle, like smooth throughout whatever thing, but it's very much like in that plot line, in that storyline, and I thought it was very well done. There was a couple parts that got a little steamy at moments, but everything stopped or was stopped by, you know, some interruption or something. So there was no actual graphic. There's just a little steam leading up to something that then doesn't happen. So just be wary. That wasn't too graphic at all, but there were some really interesting things in this. So if that sounds interesting and fun to you, I definitely recommend picking this one up also. All right, and then the last fantasy recommendation that I have, this is like a 3.5-star series for me, and it's the first book in this series, and that is Splintered. This is by A.J. Howard. I have not read this in a long time, okay? One of my friends recommended this series to me. She got it for me, and I enjoyed it. So this is a fairy tale retelling fantasy. It is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland, which I love, the classic book Alice in Wonderland. It's not here because it's on my favorites shelf. So that was one of the reasons that she got it for me, because she was like, oh, you love this. I think I like, when it comes to fantasy, I think I enjoy the retellings in the fantasy world aspect, probably more than just some like built up, you know, whatever world from scratch, at least from what I've read so far. So if you're into fantasy fairy tale retelling settings, this is very interesting. So it's very much like Alice in Wonderland in the sense that some of it is our world, completely the same, and then she like falls into, or whatever, this whole different world of Wonderland, but it's very different. So the first one is called Splintered. Also, as far as I can remember, this had no sexual content. This is a YA series that came out a while ago, and let me get the rest of these out. The second one is Ensnared, and the third one is Unhinged. So if you're looking for a new, let me put these back in order. If you're looking for a new fantasy, and of course it's backwards because of, but a new fantasy series that's like, or a new like fairy tale retelling series, this is a pretty good one to check out. Like I said, it is about a 3.5 for me. There's nothing amazing in it, but I did really enjoy it, and I'm also just not the biggest fan of fantasy, so the fact that I have like a series in fantasy means it's pretty decently well. But yeah, this is also just one that I just don't hear these ever talked about. I don't think I've ever heard them talked about, but a friend recommended them to me. So, and I know fairy tale, fantasy like retellings of stuff is a big thing, and like a lot of people like that. So if you haven't heard of this, and you especially like Alice in Wonderland, then check this out. So, all right, and so next I've got 2 Christian nonfiction books. So I'm gonna run through those real quick. The first one is The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. I know this is semi-popular, but I don't hear people talking about this a lot. I feel like it's talked a lot, kind of like Anne Frank, like everybody knows what it is, everybody knows the story, but are people actually reading it and like getting stuff out of it and talking about it? I don't see and hear a lot from it. So this book, I've read it maybe 3 or 4 times, is so good, so rich. Like, you want to read a nonfiction and stuff, and you want to get out, you know, like, I'm gonna go read C.S. Lewis and stuff, and C.S. Lewis is the bomb.com. C.S. Lewis is amazing, so yes, please do read C.S. Lewis, but at the same time, this is her story, and so it's told in a like storytelling kind of like turn of events, but it also has so much wisdom, so much richness. And a lot of people kind of think like, oh, Corrie ten Boom is like amazing, but like when you read this story, you realize how much she learned from her father, how, you know, rich he was in wisdom, and how much humility and love and grace she learned from her sister Betty. And it pulls on your heartstrings. You learn just so much about these characters, and you learn so many life lessons and spiritual lessons, warfare and real life warfare on the spiritual front too. in this book. So it's definitely a 5 out of 5 stars for me. Always would recommend. And I feel like it's just not talked about enough. If people do read it, they don't shout it to the rooftops. And I feel like it's one of those books that I want to shout to the rooftops, you know? So I definitely recommend The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Right, and then the next book, this is also one, again, underrated. I don't hear about it hardly at all. I had a friend recommend this to me. Very gracious to that friend. This really helped me in the time that I needed it. So this is Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot. This is by Mo Eisem. I'm sorry if I said your last name wrong, but this is just one of those Christian nonfictions that I've never really heard or seen talked about here on BookTube or just in general circles that I've been in. And when I talk about this or say the name, everybody's like, oh, and I was like, that's kind of the point. Yeah, it's kind of the point. It's that the church doesn't want to talk about and Christians don't want to talk about sex. And I really liked how this, and of course, Jesus and the Conversations the Church Forgot, there's a lot of other things talked about in this too, but sex and sexual things are kind of the overarching biggest thing. Mo Eisem does go into a little bit of her own story and details in the beginning. I don't think she's too overly graphic, but she is a little bit on the line, so she might be for you. I'd just be wary of that. I don't normally like stories like that, but I struggled with some of that stuff and had some stuff in the past happen to me, so this was very healing for me. It was not too much for me, and there were so many good and rich truths in this. And I loved how this book just took away that whole sex is dirty and, you know, and all this stuff that the world has corrupted. This was God made this. God created this. The world is what's corrupted it. And it really drew back to that. And if you have hurt or if it's hard, and even if you have kids, honestly, this is one that I'm going to reread and write down and kind of take notes, because there's a lot of good riches in here that I think would be really, really helpful for tweens and young teens going into all of that the world throws at them, to teach them the truths about what God says about this. And it was so comforting to me, and I'm definitely going to be using this in my parenting for that, because I really like the way she laid this out. But I haven't heard this really talked about, and this was definitely a 4 to 5 star for me. I don't remember exactly what I gave it. It's been a couple of years since I picked this up, but I really enjoyed this. If you haven't read it, 100% recommend it. It's so underrated and under talked about, but it's such a rich book. So, all right. So I have two kind of semi in the same category, but semi not. So I'm just gonna tell you what they are. The first one is Zoo. This is by James Patterson. So this is a thriller slash kind of like dystopian vibe. This was made into a TV show, and I watched the TV show and I like the TV show, but I also read this first book and I love this book. Actually, I'm not even sure if there's more books. I should maybe look into that. But I love this first book. I love this type of like sci-fi thriller dystopian thing. I love it. This was really good. I think I gave this like a 3.5 or a 4 star. Just really enjoyed it. It was really easy and fun to read. But yeah, I don't hear this talked about. I know James Patterson is a very widely known author and widely talked about author, but I haven't really heard this one talked about here on BookTube or just in my general books circles when James Patterson's name comes up. So I just wanted to say this is a pretty solid and good one, and a very easy, quick read. So if you're wanting kind of like thriller vibes, but you don't want the typical psychological, oh, wife cheated and blah, 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 we're gonna kill. I hate those. Oh my gosh, it's all thriller books now. Anyway, if you want more of a sci-fi dystopian type of like thriller, I would definitely pick this one up. All right, and then the other one is a thriller slash horror slash science fiction. I know, and I think you guys know what this is because I talk about this a lot on my channel, but I talk about it because I love it and because it's so underrated, and that is Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. Y'all know I love this book by now. Y'all know, and if you haven't read it, please, 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 this is my 100th time saying it, read it. Of course, if you have, it is technically in the horror genre, so there is some disturbing stuff, and I will tell you the hardest thing to get through is like in the first chapter or so there, for me personally, because it involved a child. And that was the hardest thing. So if you can get past that, then, you know, but, you know, maybe look up trigger warnings or content warnings. It is a horror. It is dinosaurs. They're going to eat people. I'm going to be kind of graphic about it. So, but, you know, I love dinosaurs. So anyway, this is a widely known movie. Everybody's watched the movie. Has anybody read the book? A lot of people haven't, unfortunately. A lot of people don't even know this is a book. So here I am to shout it from the rooftops. Underrated book, Jurassic Park. Go read it, please. You make me so happy. Seriously, it's amazing. 5 out of star, like 6 out of star. Oh my gosh, I know people say that. It's a 6 out of star for me. I don't even know what that means, but I know what it means for this. All right, and I have one manga recommendation for you guys. This is just one, I'm not crazy into manga, but this is one that I don't hear talked about a ton, and this is amazing. Amazing. This is Full Metal Alchemist. Guys, this is amazing. And if you want to watch the anime, if you're one of those people who aren't that into reading the manga, but you like to watch the anime, don't watch Full Metal Alchemist. Watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, because that's the good one, and that's the one that follows the storyline of the manga better. So watch that one if you're going to watch it. But this is so good. It is about two brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric. Oh my goodness, if I can say it. And they're alchemists. They're learning alchemy in this world, and they basically tried to do unforbidden alchemy, bringing somebody back from the dead, and this is why he's got a robotic arm, and he is a suit of armor. This is actually his younger brother. I don't think any of that was spoiler. Was it? No, I don't think so. I think you learned that like pretty much like right away. That, yeah. So amazing. This is one of my all-time favorite mangas, animes ever, and I just don't hear it talked about enough. So I'm here to shout it to the rooftops that if you're wanting to check out something, check this out. And also check out the trigger warnings, because there is a very disturbing thing in the first couple volumes. So, all right, and next I have one historical fiction for you, and this is Carrying Albert Home. This is by Homer Hickman. This is one that I haven't really heard talked about like ever. I picked this out at a blind date with a book thing. So I just like picked it, and I love alligators, guys. I love reptiles and alligators. And it said alligator, and I was like, I'm in. I am in for the ride. I don't care what this book is, I'm in. And this was pretty cute. I think this was a 3.5 or 4 star for me. Very cute book. I'm kind of back and forth with historical fiction. I have not liked a lot, and I've loved a few, so like it's not like my genre, but I do like some in it. But yeah, this is really fun. This is basically there's a married couple, and the wife has an alligator, and the alligator's getting way too big to hold, and the alligator don't like the husband. So basically they take a trip down, and I think this is set in 1930s in the Great Depression era. They basically take a trip down to Florida because they're going to set Albert free. They're carrying Albert home because he's just getting too big. And so it's just got a lot of like great themes, and it's also just very fun and lighthearted and funny, and it gives you those, you know, historical fiction vibes and stuff because of the era and everything. But this was just fun and short and sweet, and I had never ever heard it talked about, so I figured I should talk about it. So yeah. All right, guys, and the last one I have is a Christian contemporary romance book. So I only picked one romance. I know I love romance, but I felt like a lot of the romances that I have and that I love are just so widely known. This one, on the other hand, I've hardly ever heard talked about, ever, and it's so good. So that is Not Since You by Dulcie Dameron. Dulcie Dameron is a Christian contemporary romance author. So I'm not sure 100% if all of her books are like Christian, like have faith aspects in them. I know that she's coming out with quite a few new ones this summer, but this one right here has some great faith aspects. It's very small though. I will say that. Like, it's not like this big in your face thing, but it's just so natural in their daily lives and in the story. And it's such a like day-to-day, this is just our life. We live with Christ. We go to church, like that kind of setting, and it's small town. And it was so good. I loved having the faith integrated like that because it felt so natural and so real. So I really enjoyed that. The entire story wrapped around just forgiveness. Like, that is what the romance and like her life, whatever, it's just, it all wrapped around this overarching theme of forgiveness. And, you know, it's so good with the faith aspect and stuff. And she's still like, even making this clean and closed door and like not any stuff, she still has and brings the sizzle in some of these scenes between these characters, and it's very nice. I loved it. There is a content warning of there is some sexual harassment in this from one guy, and so do be wary if some of that stuff, you know, is hard for you to read. That does have this in it, but guys, this is just so good. So good. I cannot sing it to the rooftops enough. I think these are all of the recommendations. Is that right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Yes, and then one I didn't have bring up physically. So all of the book recommendations of underrated books that I have for you today. I'm gonna put these down now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if I convinced you to read any of these books. Let me know which one you're going to pick up. If you have an underrated book that you just love, please leave it in the comments down below and recommend it to me. I would love to check it out, guys. Let's just share our favorite like underrated books with each other. All right, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.